Albert Breer, senior reporter, even though this is only his first year, joins us on the Rich Eisen Show. Do you like the title senior reporter?
They just gave it to me, and it was, for most people, it's senior writer, but because my responsibilities are video and all of this different stuff, it became senior reporter. So there's the backstory on that. And you forgot to mention that New Year's Eve is also the day when the Buckeyes will be playing in a national semifinal.
My fault. All right. I want to talk about – all right, we'll get this out of the way now. What happens, by the way – what would you do if Ohio State fell out of the top four? How about that?
I'd be angry. I mean, here's the thing. Last year so last year was Ohio State was clearly one of the best four teams. They didn't get in. I totally understood it because Michigan State had one loss, right? And so there really was no argument you could make. They won the conference championship. They had the same amount of losses, and they won the head-to-head. So there wasn't much of a debate. Even though they got just blown out of the building in Dallas by Alabama, they earned their way there. This isn't the same thing at all. This is Penn State's got 2 losses, Wisconsin's got 2 losses, and I'm sorry, but that counts. You did lose those games, and I know Penn State's loss was in September to Pitt, and I think early October or late September to Michigan, but those still count. And so
does Penn State beating Ohio State not count?
It does count, but they have 2 losses. 2 losses count. 2 losses, that matters. And Ohio State has a stronger resume than I think anyone else in the country if you look at who they beat.
And
That's the argument I would make.
And I'm kind of with you here, watching the selection show, whatever they want to call it, where they revealed the thing on ESPN earlier in the week. It seems like that committee loves them, the Buckeyes. Didn't you get that impression?
And you know what, Andrew? Part of it, I wonder if it's a reaction to last year. That the committee put Michigan State in, and Michigan State got blown out, and the year before Ohio State won the national title. So I wonder if there's a little fear on their part that if they put Penn State or Wisconsin in there as the 4 seed and leave Ohio State out, then Alabama's absolutely going to boat race one of those teams.
Yeah.
And I think they want to avoid that as well. And I think the perception is, whether it's right or not, you can argue that until December 31st. I think the perception is that Ohio State is far better equipped to deal with Alabama, Clemson, or Washington than Penn State or Wisconsin are.
Should if Clemson wins, should they jump you guys to 2 since they're conference champion?
I think that's fine. I don't Chris, I don't have any problem with that. In fact, I think Washington, you can make an argument for them too, although their loss was different. You know what I mean? They physically got handled by
at home, too.
At home,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, whereas, Ohio State lost on the road on a blocked field goal, and Clemson lost at home, but to a pretty game Pitt team in kind of a weird way at the end of their game. It's just, if you want to, that's how I would do it personally, is I would compare losses, and I would say, Clemson and Ohio State flip a coin, and then Washington probably look the weakest in their loss.
Yeah, I'll go on record right now. I don't think anything's changing this weekend. I just don't. But that's just me. Albert Breer joins us.
I think to some degree, I'll leave it at this. I think to some degree Michigan State screwed Penn State and Wisconsin with whatever they put out there on the field last year.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense. Albert Breer from the MMQB. Want to actually talk about the NFL. Rob Gronkowski, back surgery. He's out here to see Dr. Watkins again, third time for back surgery. Anyone who's had 1 back surgery tells you it's brutal. 3 back surgeries, it's awful. He's 27 years old, Albert. What's the chance that he is somewhere other than New England next year?
I'd say it's a coin flip, 50-50 at this point.
Really?
Yeah, and it's complicated with the Patriots. There are a few different things here. For one thing, you guys saw the statement, right?
Yep.
What other player in the 16 years that Bill Belichick has been there has afforded a joint statement with the family, with their own
And this is the second time that's happened.
And there's no one, right? And so you add that to the fact that you don't know if he's going to be on the field at the end of the year. 5 out of the last 6 years now, if you count this year, he's going to have entered the end of the season banged up and not at 100%, and in some of those cases out of the lineup altogether. It's cost them at the end of years. And then on top of that, you've got all the Gronk Inc. stuff, right? So it's the family, it's the stuff that winds up on TMZ, all of that.
But do they really have an issue with that? Because
here's the thing, Andrew. He's high maintenance. He's high maintenance. I don't think there's any question about that. And so you're willing to put up with all of that as long as the performance is at the level that merits it. And I think the maintenance is starting to catch up to the performance here. And it's not that he doesn't play well when he's in there. It's just that he's not always in there. And he's still got value, and that tells me, I think that informs all of us, that they would look and just see what he's worth this offseason. And if someone offers them a 1, would they do it? I think they think really hard about that. The other part of this, too, if you're going to re-sign Martellus Bennett, right, who they really, really like, then what Gronk's making over the next 3 years, which is $24 million, sets a natural ceiling for what you can pay Bennett. Because if you pay Bennett $1 more than Gronk, then Gronk's going to be headed back to the negotiating table and say, hey, wait a minute, I've laid it on the line for you guys for 7 years. And so you can tell, I mean, there's just a lot going on here to where I think they would at least entertain the idea of dealing him off. And we've seen it in the past with guys like Deion Branch and Richard Seymour and Randy Moss.
Chandler Jones.
Jamie Collins. That's the way you leave New England, unless you're willing to stay on their terms.
Albert Breer joins us from the MMQB.
He's not that guy.
I just think that if I'm trading for him, I'd be so afraid that the guy can't get on the field for me that I wouldn't give up a lot. But, that remains to be seen. Hey, I want to switch gears real quick here. When it comes to the Raiders and it comes to the Chargers, Albert, which do you think is more likely to happen? The Chargers are in L.A. next year, or the Raiders are eventually in Vegas any year?
I think the Raiders are eventually in Vegas. Now, we know the Raiders are going to be in Oakland next year, and even during the interim while the stadium would be built in Las Vegas. But I think I think the Raiders are committed to going to Vegas right now. Then I think eventually the NFL is going to work out any issue it has with actually going there. I think they believe that there's a market there for them. And I think Jerry Jones being the driving force behind this really, really helps. And I think a lot of the owners, Andrew, are impressed by the fact that Mark Davis could go out and find a solution the way that he did. Chargers haven't found a solution for themselves. I don't think that – I mean, in the end, I know they're still threatening to go to L.A. In the end, I think that they much prefer to stay in San Diego because I think they're afraid of going to Los Angeles and becoming the Clippers. So, I just look at the motivation of both teams, and I think the Raiders are highly motivated to get themselves to Vegas, whereas the Chargers would much rather stay in San Diego. And so what I think you're going to see over the next few weeks is the Chargers kind of pushing buttons to see what they can do to try to leverage something out of the San Diego market.
Right, yeah. That makes sense. I'm often highly motivated to get to Vegas, but then once I get there, I'm highly motivated to go home. I am always highly motivated to go home, like that old Southwest commercial.
It is nice to go home from there, isn't it? It almost feels like you escaped some sort of like island or something like that.
Counting down the hours to go burn my clothes and my shoes, for that matter, getting out of there. Breer, other than Gus Bradley, which I think we all agree is inevitable, is there a coach out there that on Black Monday, which I hate the name, but it's what we call it, that is there a coaching change that may surprise me, that is maybe lurking there that the average fan doesn't see?
Well, I mean, I think, the Mike McCoy to some degree is coaching for his future over the next month. Do you think
their LA situation will affect that?
It's funny because the Rams, one of the reasons why Fisher was so safe with the Rams last year is because, they felt like they couldn't run a proper coaching search anyway if they were trying to conduct a move to Los Angeles. So maybe it could play in that way. I think more than anything else with the Chargers, it's going to be whether or not it's going to be how it looks over the next month, which I think is the case with Marvin Lewis in Cincinnati too. I think the onus is on Mike McCoy now to keep the team engaged and keep the team at least. I mean, because that's the toughest division in football. Keep the team as competitive as it has been over the first 3 months for the last month of the season. As for the Bengals, I think it's how it literally how it looks at the end of the year. It cannot look like it looked in Pittsburgh at the end of last year. These are two different circumstances. They've had a lot of injuries. And Marvin Lewis has done a great job of changing that franchise over the last 15 years, right? but it cannot look like it looked in Pittsburgh. So if this is, the last couple weeks of the season, a meltdown where you got guys throwing helmets and, just looking like they're completely out of control, then we could be talking about potentially the Bengals making a change.
Yeah, I think you come to a point where, and all coaches will tell you this, you kind of plateau and the message no longer cuts through. There are obvious personnel issues this year and injury issues with the Bengals that have nothing to do with Marvin Lewis and his coaching ability, but he's the second longest tenured coach behind Bill Belichick. By the way, I think the Chargers beat the Bucs this week to get to 6-6 and actually make the last couple of weeks interesting. I don't know if they make the playoffs. I'd be very surprised if they do, but I actually like them this week. Either way, hey, Breer, good luck watching college football and praying and hoping this weekend, all right?
All right, thanks. Have a great weekend, Andrew.
Likewise. Friend of the program, Albert Breer.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.